This conference will now be recorded.
In yesterday's session, we were discussing about what is infrastructure and what is on-premise infrastructure and what is cloud computing and what is cloud. We discussed about types of clouds and we discussed about cloud service models. Today, we'll start with actual AWS. So let me get into the actual AWS concept. But before I go to AWS, I see attendance is very less, guys. Is this the same strength everyday people attend? Almost 50% of the students are not there in the class. More than 50% of the students are not there in the class. So they don't want to learn AWS? Are there already know AWS? How can I consider whether they already know AWS, Docker, Kubernetes, or they don't want to learn Docker, AWS, Kubernetes? Or they are already overconfident, whatever I learned that is more than sufficient for me to get into DevOps? Guys, it is not correct. These are the very important concepts whatever we are discussing now compared to whatever has been discussed so far. These concepts are more important. So you guys learned the tools, but to configure, to install all those tools, do we need infrastructure first? Without having the required infrastructure, without knowing what is storage, how can we attach storage to the servers, what is networks, why networks is important, what is servers, how to manage the servers, without knowing all these things, whatever you learned, that is of no use. And the container orchestrations are like very important nowadays. So since everyone is a professional, I don't want to scold. I am just requesting, make sure you are attending the class and make sure you are utilizing the training, whatever you are, whatever we are offering. We are trying to cover a lot of advanced concepts and again in detail, not just basics. So if you don't utilize these sessions, you will realize the consequences maybe after you attending the interviews or after you start, managing your work, you will understand the problem. So it is not a school. I don't want to take attendance or I don't want to see who is attending, who is not attending. I don't want to scold anyone. Everyone is a professional. So you have some for some reason you join the course. So try to utilize that reason. Try to utilize that opportunity for whatever purpose you join the course. Otherwise, it is of no use. That's what all I can say. If you attend the session, then you will understand. If you start practicing whatever I am discussing, then you will understand. If you do the assignments whatever we are giving, you may get some issues and you will ask the issue, sir, I am while practicing this one, I am getting so and so problem, how to fix that? So I can help you. But if you don't attend, if you don't practice, if you don't do the assignments, as a trainer, we can't do anything. Simple. So try to utilize at least from now. This is especially for the people who is not attending, and people who are attending, try to do the practice also and do the assignments also, so that you will have a lot of confidence in the subject. Okay, I don't want to take this again and again. Let's see how people join maybe for subsequent classes. at least by listening this video. Let's see if I can see some other people joining from tomorrow. Okay, so what is AWS? As I already told, AWS is a cloud service provider, CSP, cloud service provider, cloud computing platform. So AWS is a subsidiary of Amazon.com. AWS is a subsidiary of Amazon.com, which means AWS is a sub-organization in Amazon.com. So AWS provides on-demand cloud computing platforms like servers, storage, networks, etc. So what is the primary business of Amazon.com? We do use Amazon, right? Amazon.com. In US, Amazon.com. In India, Amazon.co.in. So what is that Amazon.com? What was the primary business of that Amazon.com? They are into e-commerce, retail business. But at the same time, they started this cloud computing platforms also. They are offering the cloud computing resources like a server, storage, networks based on the demand. So the advantages, as I already told, cost effectiveness, pay as you go model. So pay for whatever services you are using. There is no capital expenditure for you. Based on usage, you pay the money for whatever services you are using. So will I able to achieve elasticity, agility in the sense of speed, elasticity, agility, flexibility, security, high performance in my resources? We can achieve all these things if I start using AWS infrastructure. So this AWS offers a free tier. I hope everyone know what is AWS free tier account. So since everyone already started using AWS from day one, I can skip these two slides. How to create AWS account and what is AWS free tier. Since you are already aware, I am going to skip these two slides. Does anyone in the class don't have AWS account so far? I hope everyone has an AWS account. So I'm skipping these two. How to create a AWS account and what is AWS free tier. So first, understand the AWS global infrastructure, how AWS is managing their infrastructure. So AWS has a concept of regions and availability zones. So how AWS is managing their infrastructure? So AWS cloud spans across 84 availability zones within 26 geographic regions around the world. So AWS cloud, that AWS infrastructure is spread across the world. They have 84 availability zones within 26 geographical regions in the world. And also they announced to come up with again 24 more availability zones and 8 more new regions again. They already have these many availability zones and these many regions, and again they announced these many availability zones they are planning to create with 8 more regions in the world. So what is that region? What is the meaning of region? You take any cloud, not only AWS, you take any cloud, there is a concept of region, there is a concept of availability zone or zone. So what is the meaning of this region or availability zone? Region is basically logical name. It's a logical name which represents some geographic location, like what like Mumbai, Singapore, North Virginia, Ohio, Hong Kong, California. Like this, region is a logical name which represents some geographical location like Mumbai, Singapore, Ohio, Hong Kong, all these things. And each region will have one or more availability zones. Each region, one or more availability zones. Each region will have one or more availability zones. More availability zones. So region is represents some location. Each region will have one or more availability zones. Then what is this availability zone? Availability zones are basically physical data centers, owned and managed by AWS. In case of AWS availability zones, owned and managed by AWS. Availability zones are basically physical data centers. So if you see this map, do you have some availability zones? Do you have some regions here in India? Do you have one region? What this blue circle represents, basically what this blue circle represents as per this slide? Region. So these are already existing regions. These are all existing regions. In India, we already have one region existed. Now, if you see in US also, do you have some regions, AWS regions? In Africa, in African continent also, do you have some regions? In Australia, Singapore, Hong Kong, like this, we have a lot of regions already. So let me open this link, whatever is given here. You will get the official, this is from official AWS website only. If you see this map, this is what I kept there. Now in Mumbai, in India, do you already have one region? In India, do you already have one region? Here, the blue circle. So this is already existed. What is this which is in orange? Coming soon, which means they are planning to create one more region. In India, again they are planning to come up with one more region, Hyderabad. If you remember, does AWS has started their data center in Hyderabad recently? I think before Corona, just before Corona, they announced. So they are planning to come up with one more region in Hyderabad, in India. So they might have already started, but it is yet to functional. It is not yet available for the consumers or users of AWS. They might have already started the work, but it is not fully functional. It is not fully available for the users of AWS. So already we have one region called Mumbai. So within that region, as I already told, region consists of multiple availability zones. Region consists of multiple availability zones. What is the meaning of availability zone? As I already told, availability zones are physical data centers, actual data centers. That is physical. So if you see within Mumbai, how many availability zones we have within Mumbai region? 3, which means within that Mumbai region, how many availability zones? I mean to say, how many data centers are managed by AWS within Mumbai region? 3. So each region is again isolated from other. What is the meaning of it? Each availability zone again isolated from other. Within that region, each availability zone is isolated from other. What is the meaning of it? In Mumbai, we have 3 availability zones, 3 data centers. Does it mean all are at same location, same place? No. Same region, but different places, different locations. Maybe one availability zone might be in Pune, one availability zone might be in Mumbai, some other will be in some other location. So each availability zone is isolated from each other. AWS will maintain some standards, guys. So they will maintain approximately 250 plus kilometer radius, 250 plus kilometer radius between each availability zone, in that region. So why they are maintaining 256 kilometer radius? Why not all the availability zones in same location? Why the cloud is following these type of standards? Basically, to achieve high availability, to recover from natural disasters. Let's assume in Mumbai region, all the data centers are in same location. If some natural disaster has happened in that location, or some maintenance activity is going to happen in that data center, or some threat, maybe terror attacks, maybe natural disaster. If all the data centers are in the same location in that region, does the infrastructure, does the resources in that location will be impacted if any natural disaster, any maintenance activity, any threats to the data center? So to achieve high availability and disaster recovery, recovering from the disaster, right? Even though some disaster happened, we should not lose our data, we should not lose our servers, we should be able to access the applications and data even though some disaster has happened. We need to have a disaster recovery and high availability. So for that purpose, they have a concept of availability zones within the region. Now in real time, we are going to create our applications. We will deploy our applications in multiple servers. So is it recommended to create all your application servers in same availability zone in that region? Suppose Mumbai is offering multiple availability zones. Is it a best practice, or is it recommended to create all of your application servers in a same availability zone? Is it recommended to do that in same availability zone? No. So in that case, can I create my application servers in multiple availability zones, even though one of the availability zone itself is not available? can I, users of my applications can still access the applications which is running in different availability zones in that region if I have multiple servers? That servers are spread across multiple availability zones. Yes. So they have a concept of region and availability zone. Availability zone is nothing but an actual data center which is owned by AWS. So is it recommended to create all of your application servers or database servers in a single availability zone in any region? No. You have to distribute your servers into multiple availability zones, so that if some availability zone is not up because of some natural disaster, because of some maintenance activity in the data center, can we still access our applications from the servers which are running in a different availability zones in that region? Yes. So that is what concept of region and availability zone. Like this, does AWS is having their data centers across the globe in Oregon, in North California, Canada, North Virginia, like this, London, Ireland, Bahrain, like this, across the globe, they have a regions. These are regions. Within this region, availability zones. So as of now, 84, which means does AWS is owning 84 data centers across the globe? Yes. And again, each data center is connected with each other using marine cables. Using marine cables, submarine. I mean to say, under the sea also there are cables in the world, guys. The network cables are there under the sea. So each data center is connected with each other across the globe. The network is across the globe. The cables are across the globe. The each data centers, each servers are interconnected. Each data centers are interconnected. So we have a concept of regions and availability zones. This concept not only for AWS, if I go for GCP also, do you have a concept of regions in GCP, Google Cloud? Do you have a concept of availability zones in GCP also? Yes. If I go for Azure also same concept, Azure regions, but instead of availability zones, there the terminology will be different. The terminology is different. Instead of availability zones, they are going to call it as a availability sets. Availability sets, something like that, different terminology. So is everyone clear? What is AWS global infrastructure? What is region? What is availability zone? Sometimes in the interview they will ask, what is global infrastructure? What is region? What is availability zone? So how AWS is managing the infrastructure? They have their own data centers across the globe. Guys, let me show you some virtual tour of AWS data center, so that you can understand how exactly the data center. Let me show some video how exactly it looks like. If I have some video. So this is how it looks like. So it will be spread across multiple hectares. It will be spread across multiple hectares, and there will be a server racks. There will be a physical infrastructure, but who will own that infrastructure? Who will maintain, manage that complete infrastructure? So it is something like this. It will be spread across multiple. This is kind of one data center, one availability zone. So the engineers at the data center will keep on monitoring the infrastructure, and they are going to replace if there are any infrastructure which is failed. So you have a lot of people configuring that infrastructure. If you see, there will be a lot of security also, physical security also. Along with software security, there is a lot of physical security around the data center. This is how it looks like inside. So even though we are creating a servers in AWS, that server will be running somewhere in the data center, AWS data center, that is owned and managed by AWS. Okay. So that is how it looks like. Just to give an overview, I open this virtual video. So is everyone clear what is region, what is availability zone in the cloud terminology? So Venkatraman is asking why many are having 3 data centers in every region. If I have only one data center, which means one availability zone, if some maintenance activity in that availability zone, the data center, or some natural disaster happened in that location in the data center, or some threats happen to the data center, then can I call that as a highly available infrastructure? Can I call that as a disaster recovery infrastructure? No, right? So if I have a multiple data centers in that region, the users of that AWS, then will impact. So if I create a server in one availability zone, will it reflect in another availability zone? No, it won't reflect in another availability zone. It is your responsibility to create a servers in multiple availability zones for achieving high availability. It is not like if you create one server, there will be 3 servers in the background. It is not like that. It will be one server only. You need to create, by understanding all these concepts, you need to create an infrastructure such a way that even though something went wrong in one of the availability zone, it should not impact your application. So you can create a servers in multiple availability zones in that region. Okay. Now let's continue. As I already told, region is a logical concept. Region is a logical concept. Amazon services are hosted in a multiple locations worldwide. These locations are composed of regions, logical name, and each region will have availability zones. Each region will have a multiple isolated locations known as availability zones. What is the meaning of availability zone? Availability zones are nothing but actual data centers owned and managed by AWS. So is the data centers are interconnected in that region or globally? It is interconnected within that region as well as globally also. Is that availability zones, data centers are interconnected within that region or globally? It is interconnected within that region also and interconnected globally also. Local networks within that region, local network, kind of a LAN, fiber cables within that region, kind of a local network. If they want to connect each data center with other data center globally, that is kind of a different network. Now, how to choose the right region? Suppose you are working as an AWS architect. You are working as an AWS architect, AWS administrator. Guys, let me tell you first, there are different roles available in the DevOps. So AWS architect, and AWS administrator. Like this, you have lot of roles. AWS developers. Like this, lot of roles are there. Now, whatever services I am covering, AWS is like a ocean. AWS is like a ocean, guys. There are lot of services. There are services available related to infrastructure. There are services available to infrastructure. There are services available for data warehousing. Databases also available. And there are services available for machine learning and artificial intelligence. Like there are a lot of services available. AWS is like a ocean. Now we are trying to understand whatever services which is required as a DevOps engineer. AWS has a lot of services, like close to more than 100 services are there. We are not covering all those services. We are covering only whatever is required as a DevOps engineer. And again, DevOps engineer is different, AWS architect is different, AWS administrator is different. What is the role of this AWS architect? With whatever services which I am covering, you will not become a AWS architect. With whatever services I am covering as part of this DevOps program, you will not become an AWS architect, you will not become an AWS administrator also. So we are covering only infrastructure related services as a DevOps engineer, whatever is required. For a DevOps engineer, do we need to understand what is server, what is storage, what is network, what is load balancer? As a DevOps engineer, only infrastructure. So we are covering only those services. In the syllabus also we have given what services we are going to cover. In the syllabus also we have given. But you cannot become an AWS architect or administrator with whatever service we are covering as part of this one. So what is the JD of the AWS architect? What is his JD? What he has to do? He has to design the infrastructure. He has to design the infrastructure for the application. So if he has to design the infrastructure for that application, does he requires to be familiar with all the services, most of the services in AWS, and how it works, how we can use that service? He is going to design the required infrastructure and resources in AWS. He will give the design, but he will not implement that solution. He will just give the design. So the lower resources like a leads or AWS administrators or leads, they will create an infrastructure as per the design provided by architect. As per the design provided by the architect, they will create the infrastructure. So keep in mind that you are not the one who is going to do everything in any tool. There are different roles, different persons available. So based on your role only, you will do. Suppose you are part of AWS infrastructure team. You are part of AWS administrator team. Then are you responsible for creating a required servers, storage, network for that application, for that client, for that project? Yes. But you are not part of AWS team. You are part of just a CI/CD team. So are you going to create a storage network for that application if you are just part of CI/CD team? No. So what is your role if you are only part of CI/CD team? You are going to write a pipelines, continuous integration, continuous deployment. But who will create an infrastructure for you? Who will create application servers, network, storage for you? That infrastructure team. But which doesn't mean we should not be familiar with these tools. We have to familiar with this AWS resources also. Otherwise, it is very difficult for you to understand and troubleshoot if any issue comes. So let me make a clear context. These are the services we are going to cover as part of this DevOps program. Before I start AWS, let me tell you, which we have already shared in the syllabus copy also. Here and there, small services we will be covering. Here and there, small services we will be covering. I am not giving all these small services. So these are the services. We are not covering CloudWatch. We are not covering CloudWatch, and there are a lot of other services also. Lambda, CloudWatch, RDS, WAF, Web Application Firewall. Like this, there are a lot of other services. If you want to become a developer, you need a Lambda. You need to learn a Lambda. If you want to become an administrator, you need to know all these details like RDS, WAF, CloudWatch, RDS, all those things. So this is not the course for AWS roles. Whatever course we designed, this is for a DevOps role. So we are covering these services as part of this program. There is a separate course available if you want to become an administrator or architect. That is completely different program. There only AWS, no Linux, no shell script, no Maven, no Jenkins, no Docker, only AWS. Okay. Hope everyone is clear. That cloud engineer can be architect or he can be administrator, but he should know multiple clouds, not only single cloud. He should be able to know multiple clouds like maybe AWS and Azure also. That kind of a role. That guy can be an architect or that guy can be an administrator also, but that is one JD, job description. Okay. Now let's consider you are AWS solution architect. Then how do you choose the right region? Suppose you got a project and the project architect decides he wanted to go with cloud. He wanted to create an infrastructure in the cloud. What is the meaning of infrastructure? As I told, infrastructure is nothing but server storage, network, all those things. Servers, required servers for your application, required storage to store your data for your application, and networks, databases, etc. Now, how do you choose the right region for your application? Now, what is the first and foremost thing which we need to consider if you want to choose the region? Can I blindly go and create a servers in Mumbai region because I am in India? I love my mother India, so I want to create servers in India like that. You'll blindly go and create the required servers, storage in blindly in whatever location. Suppose you have a dream of going to the US. Let's see, at least I am not able to go to US. Let me create my servers at least in US. Are you going to do like that blindly? No. The first and foremost thing has to be keep in mind that user or customer location. User or customer location. What is the meaning of user or customer here? Do you mean is it a user of AWS or is it a user of application? Does it mean it's a user of AWS, the guy who is creating a resource in AWS, or it is a user of application, the end users? The end users, application users. Let's take this example. Maybe whatever, like LIC or Flipkart, like this. So Flipkart application or LIC application, let's say they want to develop one application, LIC. Of course, they have already developed. So they need an infrastructure to deploy this application, right? Let's say they have decided they want to deploy in a cloud. They don't want to manage the infrastructure on their own. They don't want to set up their own data centers. They want to use CSP, cloud service providers. Now, if you see for this application, let's say the development team is going to develop this application, whoever is working on this LIC, the operations team, the operations team is responsibility to manage the infrastructure deployments and all those stuff. So the operation team decided that they will go with cloud. They can go and blindly create the resources in any region in that AWS? No. They need to consider the user location, end user location. If you take this application as example, is LIC is doing the business across the globe, or the LIC is targeting only within India? LIC is only within India, right? So the end users are from which location? India. So they need to consider the available regions within India to create an infrastructure for this application. Do they need to consider the available regions in that location, India? Yes. So they have to check first user location. Then next goes to the pricing. What is the meaning of pricing? Suppose my application is used out of India. Let's say in India, I have Mumbai region and I have nearby Singapore region also there. But in India, if the infrastructure charge, the charges for AWS resources are very high compared to the Singapore, can I compare the prices of the services offered by that cloud into the nearby regions also? Suppose India is one region, near to India I have Singapore region also. Can I try to see whether that pricing is little less or more in the nearby regions? Yes. But even though the price is less in nearby region, can I blindly go and create a server again in Singapore, even though price is less in Singapore regions? No. The next factor comes to the latency. What is this latency? We call it as a network latency. So your users are from India. If your servers are in Singapore region, do we have some latency in the network, which means do we get a response little slow if the actual servers are somewhere and end users are somewhere? When you are accessing the application, do you have some network latencies? Simple, guys. Let me make it simple. Now I am one of the LIC customer. I am in India. So the application, that LIC application, is hosted somewhere. Let's consider, now this is Mumbai region. Now when we try to access that application, the moment you type that application URL here, does the request goes to that respective load balancers and the respective application servers from your laptop? Request goes to the load balancer of that application. From that load balancer, it will route the traffic to the application servers where that application is hosted. Now let's say I have hosted this infrastructure in a Singapore region. Let's consider, because Mumbai region, they're charging more for same services, but in Singapore it is charging less. Let's say if I create this infrastructure in Singapore, do have some latencies? Because network, does your request has to be transferred over network? Does your data needs to be transferred from your laptop? This is source client laptop, source laptop. This is destination server. Over the network, is it going to communicate with these servers? Yes. So if your servers are in a different regions, do you have some small latency, network latency in the communication? Yes. So even though price is less in Singapore, can I go and blindly create a servers in Singapore? No, I need to check the latency, network latency. So let me show you, just to give an example. You can use some kind of a websites. Some examples we can use: AWS latency test, something like this. Some websites are there. Now, if you see, it is just going to ping your servers. I mean to say, from this laptop, it is going to see how fast it can get the response from the respective locations. How fast it can get the response from respective locations. Now, my laptop, I am in which which location? This is where I am testing the latency from this system. I am in India. So if you see, it is trying to test the latency. If you see here, is it taking more time when it has to communicate with the infrastructure which is there in US? Do you see it is taking like 340 milliseconds, 500 milliseconds, more time? But if you see in India, Mumbai, Asia specific, is it getting a response very quickly, like 50 seconds or like 80 milliseconds, 100 milliseconds, very less time? So if you if you host your application maybe in this data center, in this region, do you have some performance issues in your application, which means will you get a response very slow compared to the other data centers? Because you are from India, your infrastructure is somewhere else. So this also very important: latency, network latency. Even though network latency is not much difference, and the next thing we should consider is service availability. Service availability. What is the meaning of service availability? Even though latency is fine, what is the meaning of service availability? Service availability in the sense, AWS is offering lot of services. Does it mean all the services are available in all the regions? No. So, but most of the services, like very important core services like compute, network, storage, databases, load balancer, will it be available in all the regions, the core and important services? Yes. So you need to check whether whatever service you are looking, whether that service is available or not. Even though that service is not available, can you go with your maybe platform as a service and deploy that solution, or can you create an infrastructure, just the servers, and develop that solution on your own if required? Yes. The next thing goes to the security and compliance requirement. What is the meaning of security and compliance requirement? Does each client, each project, will it have their own security requirements, security compliances, security standards? Each application will have their own security standards. So will I able to achieve all those security requirements in that region or not, also we need to check. Will I able to achieve all those security requirements in that region also or not, I can check. Guys, AWS is managing separate data centers for US governments also. If you see here in the AWS global infrastructure, where is that? If you see that AWS global infrastructure, AWS has a separate data centers for US government itself. So do we able to create the infrastructure in these regions, will it be available for us? No. This is only for US government. Separate infrastructure is managed by AWS for US governments. So in this data centers, only government related applications are hosted, right? In China also, we have data centers, but in the China region, will I able to create the infrastructure? Will it be available for the people or applications outside China, that region? No. The China government has imposed a rule that it will not be allowed to create infrastructure for other countries. So they restrict. So each data center also has to follow some security guidelines imposed by the government, and we have also have some security requirements. We need to check whether it is compatible with other or not. So as an architect, do we need to consider all these things? How to choose the right region? As an architect, yes. Suppose if I have a global application, I mean to say multiple countries my users are there. In that case, can I deploy that application in multiple regions instead of one region? Can I deploy that application in multiple regions? If my application is global application, worldwide customers are there, can I deploy that application like Facebook, YouTube, Gmail? So can I deploy that application across the globe, which means multiple regions, multi-region? What is the meaning of multi-region? Your applications are hosted in a multiple regions. If you have your applications, that is also possible. Okay, so who will decide all these things, whether it has to be in single region, whether it has to be multi-region? If it is a multi-region, how my infrastructure should be? That is the architect's role. Architect will design the infrastructure. The admins or leads will implement that infrastructure as per the design provided by architect. But since we are just a normal software engineers, senior software engineers, so you may not do, but at least we should understand what is AWS, how we can consider, what and all things we need to consider while we are creating an infrastructure. We should be aware. Is everyone clear, guys? If someone asks in the interview also how to choose the right region, these are the important components which you need to explain. If someone asks in the interview how to choose the right region for your application, these 5 plays very important role. Okay. With that background, let's start with our very first service, EC2. With that background, first let's start with our very first service, EC2. What is EC2? What is the full form of EC2? EC2 full form is Elastic Compute Cloud. Sir, what is there in EC2 to discuss? From day one, I am using EC2. I am already familiar with EC2. What is there to discuss? There are a lot of things we need to cover in EC2, guys, which you might not be aware. We'll discuss all those things in EC2 sessions. Okay. So what is EC2? Elastic Compute Cloud. It's a virtual machine in AWS. EC2 is nothing but a virtual server. It's a machine, it's a server in AWS. So using this EC2 service offered by AWS, can I create as many servers or as few servers as required for my application? EC2 is one service which is offered by AWS. Using EC2, can I create as many servers or as few servers as required for my application? Yes. EC2 provides scalable computing capacity. Scalable computing capacity in the AWS. What is the meaning of scalable computing capacity? If required, can I scale my capacity of the server or storage whenever it is required? You might have already done. You might have created T2.micro server. You might have created T2.micro server. So what is the capacity of the T2.micro? 1 GB RAM and 1 core processor. 1 GB RAM and 1 core processor. So you might have already created T2.micro, but you are running out of CPU, running out of memory. You might have guys changed the T2.micro from T2.medium. Did you guys, I think, already done that in some scenarios? Did you guys change the instance type from T2.micro to T2.medium, large, X large? Which means, am I able to scale the capacity of that computing? Am I able to scale the capacity of that server whenever it is required? Is it offering scalable computing capacity? Yes. And also, using EC2, can I create as many servers as required, as few servers as required for my applications? Yes. And also, can I configure the security, networking, and storage for that EC2? How much storage? Whether I need 10 GB disk, 100 GB disk? Do I have a control to manage the storage of that server? Do I have a control of configuring the security, networking for that EC2 instance? Yes. EC2 allow you to scale up and scale down to handle the changes in the requirements, which means, will I able to scale up or scale down EC2 instances or the capacity of EC2 instances based on the changes? Yes. Now let's conceptually compare EC2 with the normal computer. The terminologies. Basic computer, basic server. Do we have an operating system? Like basic computer or server, let's say we have an operating system. In EC2 perspective, we call it as a AMI. We call it as a AMI. In EC2 perspective, that operating system is nothing but, in EC2 terminology, AMI. What is that AMI? Amazon Machine Image. Amazon Machine Image, it's a pre-configured package. It's a pre-configured package to create a server. So does that AMI will have some operating system like Red Hat, Ubuntu, CentOS, Windows, Mac? Yes. Now, in normal computer, we have a CPU, we have a RAM, CPU and memory. So in AWS, we have an instance type. In EC2 perspective, we have an instance type. Does instance type determines the power of that server, that power of that computer, which means that instance type determines how much CPU, how much memory for that server. So when I'm creating a server, are we selecting instance type? That instance type is categorized based on the CPU and memory. When we are creating a EC2, are we selecting AMI, what operating system, then instance type, the capacity of that server, CPU and memory? Are we selecting all these things in EC2? Yes. Now in normal computer, we call it as a hard disk. In normal computer, we call it as a hard drive or hard disk storage. In AWS, what do we have? What is the storage for that server? Basically, we call it as a EBS. There is a separate service called EBS. That is the storage. That is the disk for your server. So in normal terminology, we call it as a firewall. Firewall. In normal computers, we call it as a firewall. Whether you open the firewall or not, we call it. But in AWS terminology, That firewall is nothing but what? That is nothing but a security group. So in the security group, are you opening the ports? What port you want to access from that server? Yes. So like a normal computer also, does EC2 will have a IP addresses? The way your computer will have IP address, your server will have IP address. Does EC2 will have a IP address for accessing that applications in that server? Yes. So it is one computer, but we are calling with a different terminologies. This is also EC2 is also one server, one computer, one server. With different terminologies. Now, when it comes to EC2, in EC2 we have some purchasing options, guys. In the interview also they'll ask. What are the EC2 purchasing options? What are the EC2 purchasing options? So here we have these type of purchasing options. EC2 purchasing options. So we have these types: on demand, reserved, spot, then dedicated host. There is one more thing, dedicated hosts. So we have these type of purchasing options. What does it mean? On which category you can create a server, EC2 server? We have a on-demand servers, we have a reserved servers, we have a spot servers or spot instances, we have a dedicated hosts. So what is the meaning of on-demand? As a DevOps engineer, required to have a good knowledge of AMI, ABS, yes. These infrastructure services are very, very important. Whatever I have listed already, right, which I am going to cover, that is very, very important. As a DevOps engineer, we should know the infrastructure related services, whatever I have listed already, right, which is part of our syllabus. It is mandatory. Now, we have a on-demand servers, we have a reserved servers, we have a spot instances, we have a dedicated hosts. So what is the meaning of on-demand? So this is most flexible and most expensive purchasing option. Most flexible and most expensive also compared to other purchasing options. Most flexible purchasing option and most expensive purchasing option compared to other category. So you can charge, you are charged. You mean to say AWS will charge when only that instances are running. AWS will charge for on-demand servers if the instances are running. Suppose if you have stopped the instance, are they going to charge for that EC2 if you stop your server? If it is on demand, no. You are charged only when instance is running, and also you can provision or terminate instance at any point of time. You can provision, you can terminate instance any point of time. What is the meaning of provisioning? Some technical terminologies. What is the meaning of provisioning here? You can provision or you can terminate instance at any point of time. What is the meaning of provisioning here? Provisioning is nothing but creating. Provisioning is nothing but creating. Provisioning is nothing but creating. You can create or you can terminate. Terminate in the sense, can I delete anytime that instance if it is on demand? So you can create or terminate an instance at any time if it is on demand. And the way we have a on demand, we have a reserved instances. We have reserved instances. So AWS will allow you to create reserved instances for a set of time period. AWS will allow you to create an instance for a set of time period like 1 year, 3 years, for a set of time frame. We can reserve the EC2 instances for set of time frame. Significant price discount. Significant price discount. So compared to the on-demand, will they charge very less? I mean to say, compared to on-demand, will they charge less when I go for a reserved instances? Because you are sticking to some time with AWS, right? You are stick to AWS server for 3 years or 1 year like that. So they are going to give some discount compared to on-demand. But here, once you purchase a reserved instance, once you create a reserved instance, we are responsible for the entire price for entire time frame. Whether you use that server for 1 day, whether you use that server for 1 month, whether you start the server, terminate at the server, that doesn't matter. Are you responsible for that entire time frame, for how much time frame you reserve that server? Whether you terminated in 1 month, whether you are not at all using after 10 days, that doesn't matter. You have to pay for complete time frame. That is reserved instances. Now, here we have a spot instances. We have a spot instances. So what is the meaning of spot instance? Uma Shankar is asking in real time what option we will use. So I wanted to tell one thing. There is nothing called real time. Everything is a requirement. Everything is a use case. There is nothing called real time. Forget about AWS, Docker, Kubernetes, whatever it is. There is nothing called requirement. Everything is use case or requirement. As per the requirement, whatever suits for me, I will go with that option. Suppose I am confident that I need a server for continuously 3 years, then I can go for a reserved instance. Fixed. Suppose I want to increase and decrease the servers based on the load. Can I go with on demand based on the load? I can increase the servers whenever it is required. I can decrease the servers whenever it is required. Can I go for on demand? Can I go for a combination of reserved and on demand? I will always have some servers based on the load. Can I increase and decrease the servers by selecting on demand? So everything is a requirement, Uma Shankar. There is nothing called real time. Based on the requirement, whatever suits for you, you will go with that option, that solution. Now AWS is offering one more thing, spot instances. Krishna Prasad is asking, is architect will select or DevOps engineer will do? So suppose you are a DevOps engineer with extensive experience. You already have 10 years experience or 12 years industry experience. Then will they expect you to design that infrastructure also? Suppose you already have extensive IT experience. You are already having 10 years of IT experience, 12 years of IT experience. You are working on a DevOps, but sometimes you should be sometimes you should also design the infrastructure. Even though you are not designing, at least do you need to provide your inputs for the guys who is designing? If you are already experienced resource, all these things matters, right? So you need to be aware about all these options. That's why we are discussing all these things. As a DevOps engineer, if you are not doing, which doesn't mean you should not know. You should know how it is going to work. Now, this spot instances, what is this spot instances? AWS will sell instances for a short amount of time, very less time at a lower price. Suppose I want to do some kind of a POC and I need a very high configuration server. I want to do some POC, some developer or some DevOps guy want to do a POC. I need some very high configuration server with low price for less amount of time. Again, what is POC? What is the meaning of POC? Does anyone has any idea what is POC? Proof of concept. We call it as a proof of concept, which means before you are actually proposing a solution, do you need to do some kind of a POC whether that solution works or not? Before you are actually implementing a solution or before you are actually proposing a solution, you need to do some kind of a POC, proof of concept. So you need very high configuration server for less amount of time for doing the POC. Then can I go for a spot instances? AWS will give for less price and shorter amount of time. I can go for a spot instances in that case. This will work based on the bid process. This will work based on the bid process. What is the meaning of bid process? So AWS will list all the spot instances. You need to quote. You need to do the bidding, kind of a quote. You need to propose a quote. I will pay this much amount for this instance. So whoever quotes more money, they will get that spot instances. So is everyone clear? What is on demand? What is reserved? What is spot? Spot instances, reserved instances, on demand instances in AWS. Now, you guys has created lot of, what is the meaning of unused? Basically, the servers which are not used in the AWS data centers. In the AWS data centers, do they have a lot of physical machines? Lot of physical machines which are not used in the data center. They will provide as a spot instances. AWS will have their own physical machines in their data centers. They have a lot of servers which might not be used. So they will provide you as a spot instances for less amount of time. Now we guys created lot of servers from day one. In which category you guys created the servers? Under which category the servers got created when you created a servers? On demand. You guys created a servers on demand. Now if you see here, let me log into AWS. Now the moment I log into AWS, in the top right corner, what are these things, guys? All these things: US East 1, US East 2, AP South 1, all these things. What all these things? These are basically regions of AWS. Now I am in which region? As of now I am in which region? Mumbai region. So in Mumbai region, I am creating some infrastructure. I am creating some resources, AWS resources. So one second. Now I am in Mumbai region. So in this Mumbai region, I am creating resources, infrastructure related resources or whatever it is. Now here, if you see these instances, I already have some instances. What are these instances? What type of instances is this? These are on-demand instances. If required, can I terminate this instance anytime? I am responsible only when it is running. The charges are applicable when it is running. Now, the way we have on demand, do we have a reserved instances here? Reserved instances option. Now, If required, can I go and purchase a reserved instance? By going to this one, can I go and purchase a reserved instance? Like how long you are looking? How long you are looking? They are saying 1 to 12 months or 12 months to 36 months, like this. Now what type of instance you are looking? Suppose I am looking some T3.x large, right? So I can select this and I can click on search. They are going to show the price. Now if I go with this term 36 months, if I take this type of instance T3.x large, how much they are going to charge upfront? Only max 3 years. Once 3 years is done, what you need to do, guys? They are going to send a notifications. Your reserved instance is about to be expired, kind of a extension. Do you need to again renew? The way you have a LIC or policy, right? Vehicle policy. It is going to expire for 1 year. Do you need to renew if you want to continue? Like a renewal. You need to extend that reserve time. After the time frame is done, you need to extend that, again for another 3 years or whatever it is, like that. But upfront, how much they are charging here? How much dollars they are charging for this instance? If you see, this much money. Whether I use it, whether I don't use it, am I responsible for this complete duration and complete time frame? Yes. So this is reserved instances, but I don't want to create a reserved instances. Now, similarly, standard convertible. Convertible in the sense you can pay in the installments also. Convertible in the sense you can pay in the installments also. That okay. Now the way we have a reserved instances, dedicated hosts are there, spot instances are there. What is the meaning of these spot instances? What is the meaning of these spot instances? As I told, if required, can I create a servers for a less amount of time with lower price, small time frame? You can create a servers. It is like a bidding process. Now we have a one more category, dedicated, this dedicated hosts. In the document I have not captured, but there is a one more category called dedicated host. What is dedicated hosts in AWS? Let me tell you. This is AWS data center. Let's consider. In the AWS data center, do they have the physical hardware, the physical machines? This physical hardware, we call it as a physical machines. Like your hardware, like CPU, memory, storage, like this, right? Your hardware. Now, does anyone can create a server in AWS? AWS is a multi-tenant platform. AWS is a multi-tenant platform. So when we are creating a EC2, that EC2 is basically a virtual machine on top of this physical machine. There is a virtualization concept. There is a virtualization concept. Using virtualization softwares, these servers will get created on top of that physical machines. So as of now, AWS is using Citrix Xen hypervisor as a virtualization software. It is using these type of hypervisors. Now, on top of this, the EC2 gets created. Now, when I am creating a normal on-demand reserved, so this is my server. On top of the same physical resource, does any other tenants, any other user server also gets created? This server is owned by different user of AWS. This server is owned by different user of AWS, but it is isolated, guys, which doesn't mean This guy can access this guy, which doesn't mean it is isolated, but is it sharing the underlying host, underlying physical infrastructure? Yes. But when I go for a dedicated host, does this underlying hardware will be shared with any other user or any other tenant of AWS if I go with a dedicated host? No. It is completely available for you. It is completely available for you. Suppose if you have a requirement saying that you don't want to share underlying host, then you can go for a dedicated host. But most of the cases, we are going to use shared resources only, not a dedicated host. Is everyone clear what is dedicated host? What is dedicated host instances in AWS? Sometimes in the interview also they will ask what is dedicated host. Okay. So these are the purchasing options we have in the AWS. Then how we are going to charge? When I am creating a EC2 instances, how the charges are applicable? What and all things will be considered? Sir, what is the what does it matters for me? In actual project, I am not going to pay from my pocket, and I am not going to pay from my salary. Company will pay. What does it matters? It matters for us also to reduce the infrastructure charges. So we need to this is important as an architect, as a lead, guys. You need to create an infrastructure in such a way that you should try to minimize your charges also, infrastructure charges also, as much as possible. If you know how the charges are applicable, then you can design. Now on which basis AWS EC2 will be charged? Does the charges will vary based on the purchasing options? Does the charges will vary based on the purchasing options, whether you are using on demand, reserved, spot, platform? I am talking about EC2, not platform, Vineet. So does EC2 charges will be vary based on the purchasing option? On demand, reserved, spot? Yes. Then is it going to vary again based on the instance type and instance family? AWS EC2 instances are categorized into multiple types, multiple families. We have a general purpose, compute optimized, GPU optimized, memory optimized, again micro, medium, small, X large. So based on the instance type, does the charges will vary again? Whether you are using T2.micro, X large, double X large, based on that also charges will be applicable. Then does EC2 is going to use some storage disk? Memory is different, storage is different. So memory is nothing but a RAM. Storage is nothing but what? Storage is nothing but a disk. So EC2 will be internally using some disk. So based on the storage also, does the charges will applicable? How much storage you are using for that server? Yes. So even though you stop the server, still the charges is applicable for the storage, guys. Even though you stop the server, you just stopped EC2, but storage, is the storage charges will still applicable for you? Yes. How much free tier storage they are giving as part of AWS free tier account? How much free tier storage they are giving? Only 30 GB. Suppose you created a 5 servers. Each server is taking 10 GB. So how much storage you might have utilized? 50 GB. So even though you have not exceeded 750 hours, you stop the servers also, within 750 hours, the usage is not crossing 750 hours, but still, will you get a charge for storage? Will the charge for storage like additional 20 GB? Yes. So the EBS charges are additional. And also, does the charges will vary based on the AMI, based on the AMI, based on the operating system which you are using? Does the charges will vary? Does all the OS same charges? Whether you are using Red Hat, Ubuntu like that, same charges? No. The charges are going to be different based on the AMI also. And also, that the charges of EC2 will be different based on the region, AWS region. In India, they may have a different charges for same EC2 instances. In Singapore, they have a different charges based on many factors. And also, the charges are applicable based on the data also, how much data you are transferring into the instance and how much data you are getting out of that instance. Again, the data transfer charges also applicable. So does the EC2 will be charged based on all these things? Data transfer, AMI, storage, instance type, purchasing options. Based on all these things, EC2 is chargeable. Now, if you want to see, there is a pricing table here. EC2 pricing. This is official website only, guys. aws.amazon.com. This is official website. So here, if I want to see on-demand prices, on-demand prices. So here I can see, if you see, suppose Mumbai region, operating system, whether you want Red Hat operating system, whether you want Windows operating system, based on the operating system. Suppose let's say Red Hat, instance type, general purpose. Within that general purpose also, do have lot of categories like X large, double X large, medium, like your shirt sizes. So based on this instance type, is the capacity is changing like CPU and memory? If I go with this T3.2X large, what is the RAM size? How much RAM I am going to get for that instance? If I select this T3.X large, 32 GB. And how much CPU? How many cores of CPU? 8 core. So how much they are going to charge per hour? Per hour, $0.488 only for EC2. But again, does the charges applicable for EBS, how much storage you are using? Does the charges applicable for data transfer also on top of this? Yes. Now you have lot of types like this. Now let me start with the memory. You have very high configuration server. If you take this type of instance, how much RAM you are going to get? I'm sorting based on the memory. How much RAM you are going to get if I select this type of instance? How much RAM you are getting? This is RAM, very high configuration server, 6 TB. And how many CPUs? How many vCPUs, virtual CPUs? 448 virtual CPUs. A very powerful server. But how much they are charging per hour? If I select this type of instance, if I create, $56 per hour. Approximately 56 into 75 per hour. How much in Indian currency? Approximately 8 into 7. Let's consider 4,200. If I am running that for one day, how much charges? 24 hours if I am running that type of instance? 24 into 4,200, almost 1 lakh per day. Again, you may have a question, sir, what type of instance we will select in real time? You will call it as a real time. What type of instance? Am I going to select this type of instance Am I going to select this type of instance? Again, that depends on what, guys? What type of instance you will select? That depends on what? That depends on the requirement. For what purpose you need that server, and what software you are trying to install in that server, and for that software or application, how much memory, how much CPU is required for that application or software. Based on that, you will select the instance type. So is everyone clear how AWS will charge for EC2? If they ask, purchasing option, instance type, storage, AMI, region. Based on this, the charges will be applicable. Now, I'll try to create a EC2 instance from beginning, and while creating a EC2 instance, I will explain what is what in each stage. So the moment I decided the region, if required, in this region I need some servers in Mumbai region. In AWS terminology, what is this AP South one? What is this AP stands for? Is it Andhra Pradesh? That Mumbai region in AP terminology, is it Andhra Pradesh? No. Asia Pacific. Asia Pacific South 1. If I take Asia, Mumbai comes in south corner. Mumbai comes in south corner in Asia. So they have named it as AP South 1. Asia Pacific South 1. So I have decided in this region. Now, in this region, can I create a servers for my application, my requirement? Here, I can go and create a whatever type of server. Now, the first and foremost thing, when we are creating a server, in the first wizard, what we are selecting is, first what we are choosing? AMI. So, on top of that infrastructure, AWS infrastructure, I am trying to create a server by choosing the AMI. So what is AMI? A pre-configured package which is required to launch EC2 instance. It's a package, but that package contains what? That package contains operating system. That package contains operating system and some other softwares, libraries. So does AMI provide the information required to create a EC2 instance? So without AMI, will I able to create a EC2? Without AMI, will I able to create a EC2? No. So AMI provides information to create a EC2 instance. That AMI contains the operating system and some other libraries. So can I create as many servers as required from that AMI? Can I create 10 Red Hat servers? Can I create 10 Ubuntu servers like that using that AMI? Yes. We can create as many servers as required using this AMI. So I'll continue tomorrow, guys. I'll continue tomorrow. From here, it is already 9:15. There are different types of AMI. What is my AMI? Oh, we have different types of AMIs also. Community AMIs, marketplace AMIs, my AMIs. I'll continue from here tomorrow. Okay. Again, I am repeating, attend all the classes without miss. These concepts are very, very important. If you don't attend, simple guys. If you don't attend, will you able to answer any questions which is asked in the interview on these topics? We already shared lot of questions already. Did you guys saw the questions on AWS? Whatever questions asked in the interviews for our students, we already shared. So if you see those questions, will you able to answer those questions if you don't attend the classes and don't practice? No. Somehow you by-hearted interview questions. somehow you focused only on the interview questions. Sir, I don't have that much patience to attend your class 1.5 hours, and I don't want to practice. I don't have that much patience. I don't have that much commitment. I by heart only interview questions somehow, but by luck you can clear the interview. If the same questions is asked, you might have by hearted, you might clear the interview by luck. But once you get into a job, if they start giving the work on this area, if they start giving the work on these concepts, these areas, whatever you answered in the interview, will you able to manage your work and survive? No. So that's why from day one we are saying, attend all the sessions without miss, and practice, and do the assignments. If you do the assignment, same thing or similar thing, now I cannot say same task, but similar type of task you will perform. So that time will it be easy for you to survive and enjoy your job? Yes. Otherwise it's a nightmare for you. But even though you miss 1 or 2 classes, because everyone has a personal issues like personal emergencies, health issues, some family functions, I do agree. But 1 or 2 classes is fine. You can recover from the video. You can again come back and watch the video and come to up to the speed. But if you are not at all attending, I can't do anything. So that's why I'm keep on saying again and again, try to attend all the sessions without miss. Even though you miss, try to go through the recording and recover, come to the speed. Otherwise, it is very difficult. Okay. Thank you guys. I'll continue tomorrow with all these concepts again. Tomorrow we are going to create EC2. Then we will continue with EBS and other services. Thank you. We'll see you tomorrow.
This conference will now be recorded.